everyone, and welcome back to Let's React to Maintenance Phase. We're gonna get back to the podcast episode we were talking about, but I do want to just make a note real quick that Maintenance Phase is still alive. They're still recording episodes and posting them, which kind of surprised me. We have one from March 7th and one from April 4th, so there is still stuff to review for Maintenance Phase. But we're gonna go all the way back to episode 3. And let's just jump into it.
How do you think people study things?
So he says that there's further study that's needed, blah, 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 blah. And Wyeth also starts releasing these little sound bites. They start testing little phrases. And one of the big ones that catches on is they say, you have almost twice as great a chance of getting hit by lightning than of getting primary pulmonary hypertension from a weight loss medication.
I mean, that might be true, but still, like, you're not supposed to increase people. Like, you can't just compare the risk of your drugs to, like, some other thing that's going to kill them. Like, look.
Okay, that feels a little bit like pot calling the kettle black. Actually, maybe not, because the fat acceptance movement denies any health risks come from them being fat. But it's like, do you realize that pretty much everything you do increases your chance for mortality in some way or another? Driving a car increases your chance of mortality via car accident. I think comparing those two things that can both kill you isn't necessarily a bad thing. The question is, how disingenuous or how skewed is that thing presented? It's not a matter of it increasing your risk at all. I can't think of a single medication that doesn't, even on a very tiny level, increase your risk for something or another. Being obese increases your risk too. Like, it's just one of those things. That's why doctors evaluate the risk of those medications, like I said in the last episode. So I don't know, that's you're grasping at straws here, and like the risk from being obese is probably just as bad, if not worse, than what the medication, the risks from the medication for most people. There's people that are always going to be more sensitive to medication, and it's more dangerous for them, and so my point still stands. Pretty much all medications have some increased risk of something or another for you. This is just another one of those, and saying, well, we shouldn't increase the risk at all is just fucking stupid, especially when you defend obesity.
We're killing you, but an axe murder might also kill you. So I don't see what the problem is. Like, that's not how morality or medicine or anything works.
Totally. No, I will tell you, this is like...
Again, we're tying in morality, which fucking baffles me. It really baffles me to no end. Why include morality in this? And when I said defend obesity, I meant like defending staying obese, or like glorifying obesity, defending the glorification of obesity. I just want to make that quick clarification. But anyway, fucking ridiculous what these people are positing.
Aside, my dad, when he and my mom were splitting up and she would like ask him to do things differently and sort of the lead up to their divorce, right? He would be like, I don't know why you're on my case. You could have married Charles Manson. And she was like, that's not the bar.
Like, there are some men in between you and Charles Manson. There are more than one man on that spectrum.
Anyway, I felt like you would appreciate that. So within 16 days of this story breaking, the FDA essentially instructs Wyeth to add a warning to their label because there's not a warning on the label.
Oh God, don't go too hard, FDA. Really cracking down. Like, sorry, this might kill
Totally.
you, but proceed.
So Wyeth does that because they don't really have a choice. They add a warning to their label, and they also have their PR firm write what they call a Dear Doctors letter, which is update to doctors about sort of the status of this medication is changing. Here's what you need to know. So they're sort of explaining the label change, right? And one of the phrases that they include is that the evidence is inconclusive, which technically true,
yes.
But the whole letter is sort of designed to downplay concerns, right?
This is the tobacco company playbook, that one of the things...
Welcome to every fucking damage control shit that any company has done. This isn't unique to this isn't unique to tobacco companies, and it's not unique to this particular pharmaceutical company. Of course they downplay the concerns. That's what you do when you're doing damage control. Like, doctors realize this. Doctors aren't stupid. They'll take a look into it, especially if they regularly prescribe it to their patients. If they're a decent doctor, they'll look into it and decide for themselves. I don't like this. Again, it feels just like they're kind of grasping at straws. This isn't. Don't get me wrong. It's not good. I'm not like necessarily defending the company, but it's not unusual. You know?
That you learn when you look into the big fights, decade-long fights over tobacco, is that what the tobacco companies have always said is that the evidence that cigarettes cause cancer is unclear, and it actually is. That scientists still do not know exactly why cigarettes cause cancer. What they know is that people who smoke are more likely to get cancer. People who smoke more are more likely to get cancer. States which have more smokers have higher cancer rates, etc. Like, there's a million of these correlations, and there's always something that we don't know. But what companies always do is they latch on to these like ordinary things in the scientific process that like we literally can never know everything.
Yeah.
And they pick those like areas where there is.
I mean, I find this funny because the fat acceptance movement does the same thing. You know, higher weights are correlated with this health issue, but correlation does not equal causation. It just, the fat acceptance movement does it with it. Everyone will do it to defend a behavior or a product that they don't want put in a bad light. To a certain extent, it's, I don't know if I want to call this confirmation bias or what the fuck ever. Like, by all means, talk about it, but I don't know, to put this in that only sketchy places are doing this and they're latching on to, well, there's nothing conclusive. Of course they're latching on to there's nothing conclusive. Of fucking course they are. I don't really get the point of bringing it up, you know? Like, it's such a weak argument, especially when the fat acceptance movement does the exact same thing with obesity studies. Well, there's nothing proving that well, no shit. No shit. Because can we get over, like, y'all want to play pseudo-intellectual games. Y'all want to roleplay, you know, scholars, which is fine. Fucking roleplay scholars, that's fine. But, one, use the same ruler for yourself that you do for everyone else. And two, let's stop trying, if we're gonna roleplay scholars here, and like I say that not only as a derogatory thing towards them, but also towards myself. Like, I look at studies and I look at, like, we're role playing scholars when, you know, I don't have a PhD in anything related to health or fitness or any of that shit. So I look and I do my best just as they're doing their best. Can we get over the proven aspect? Can we get, because I think we can all recognize that that's not really how science works. Like, to say something is proven and therefore it is a fact and therefore it is true. Things aren't really proven the same way that we colloquially think proven is. They're not the same thing. They have never been the same thing. And we've known that they're not the same thing for a while now, and yet we still use proven scientifically and proven in a colloquial term as the same thing. And we even use proven as like the bar when most evidence and studies and stuff will never reach the bar of proven. Let's move on.
Still debate and areas where there's still uncertainty, and they're like, oh, we couldn't possibly make a decision until we get clarity on this. And it's like, no, guys, if people who are taking your drug are like dying a lot, like that's probably enough for us to like pull back, just like, let's start over.
So at the same time that they are, you know, sort of releasing this Dear Doctors letter, their lobbyists are also lobbying Congress to get Pondemon and Redux descheduled by the DEA.
Wait, what does that mean?
That means it would no longer be a controlled substance.
Meaning what, you could buy it over the counter?
Meaning that they could extend prescription timelines past those 3 months.
Oh, shit.
Right. So their internal math that's later found in sort of trial discovery shows that getting the drugs descheduled could increase their sales by 25%.
So what you're saying is they basically got FDA approval by being like, don't worry about the side effects. People are only going to be taking this for 3 months. It might be bad in the long term, but people are only taking the short term. Don't freak out. And then once it's approved, being like, oh yeah, we're just going to let people take this forever.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
That's right. So they also train their sales staff very, very briefly. It's about 5 minutes of training that they get.
Nice.
It's essentially training on how to redirect concerned questions and how to reassure doctors and customers.
Dude, yes. When I sold frozen steaks over the phone as a college student, they had like a literal script for like every objection that people would make. Like, I don't think I could make this decision without consulting my wife. And we were supposed to say like, well, I think your wife would want you to buy steaks because steaks are good. Like, we would have this little flow chart of all of their objections. I guess it's the same thing.
Side note, at some point, I would like to hear many stories about selling frozen steaks over the phone.
I did it for one night. I lasted one night. And I was like, this is gross. And then I stopped.
So there is this big media story now. Wyeth, of course, they have more money than God at this point. They swipe back. They build a $100,000 counterattack plan.
Nice.
They are paying for media blitzes about the dangers of obesity. They are making those sort of splashy high dollar contributions. And over the years ahead, lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit is filed from people who've gotten PPH and heart disease. It becomes so big that they essentially pull together a conference of 500 attorneys from around the country who are all managing fen-phen and Redux cases.
So there's like, it's so big that there's like a summer camp of people that are fighting against this one pill.
100%. So they have like doctors there to present. They have researchers. They're like gathering everyone together. There are breakout sessions, right? Like it's a whole big thing.
No way.
They do all of this, and you can actually see if you look up the adverse drug experience reports, you can see this massive crescendo of like as soon as the media coverage hits, that same year, the adverse drug experience reports skyrocket. They go up to 10,000 because now people know what to look for.
Right.
A lot of the symptoms of primary pulmonary hypertension are just like fatigue and shortness of breath and things that don't necessarily strike people as emergency conditions. But if you don't address it, I mean, it will kill you potentially.
Right. So these stories come out and everybody starts putting 2 and 2 together.
Right.
Of like, this is why I feel like this.
Yes. So as these stories start to come out and as these cases start to move forward, trial discovery starts happening. And in trial discovery, it becomes clear that Wyeth and Interneuron both have known about this since before even advocating for the approval of the drug.
Oh my God. I want to like gasp or something, but this is like such not a twist. I feel like every time we have these things of like corporate malfeasance, it's never like, and in the discovery phase, it turned out the company had no idea and they were acting in good faith the whole time. It's always just like, kill them. It's these emails from like Palpatine of just like, fuck these lives. Like this happens every time.
It's 100% the case. And actually like one of the things that shows up in the files, I will say, and this is something we should talk about on like a full episode, their attorneys and researchers both checked them on the use of this 300,000 deaths a year number. And everyone says this is unsubstantiated.
So even their basis for like the obesity epidemic is killing so many people, like there's actually not a clear number for that.
There's not good data. They advise them to say obesity contributes to X number.
I love that. So there's like no good data for that when they were just earlier talking about studies saying, well, it wasn't proven. You're basically saying the same thing just with different words as a way to shoehorn in your obesity isn't bad for you sort of thing. Again, not defending the fen-phen company, whatever, not defending them. I'm just pointing out the hypocrisy isn't the word that I want to use, but it's closest in meaning of how you'll hold someone else to a certain standard and yet for yourself you'll use the same argument. Just want to put that out there. Maybe both can be true. Did you ever think that maybe both can be true? Maybe fen-phen was a dangerous drug for a number of people, and also the obesity epidemic is a concern. Both can be true. And let's say that the studies that they used at the time weren't great studies. There have been hundreds, if not thousands, that have come out since then with the general consensus. And if you're averaging everything out, obesity puts you at higher risk for a number of conditions. That is what you're right. It's not, we don't have definitive causation, but that doesn't mean that the general information points to a certain answer. Just like it did with smoking and fen-phen. Obesity is also a concern.
Of the top 10 causes of death, which you can say, right? Potentially. Right. But this is like straight up inaccurate. And people internally were like, this isn't accurate. We shouldn't be saying it.
My 2 rules for this are anytime you see a statistic with contributes to or at risk of, you should like run in the opposite direction.
Totally. And miracle drug.
Yes,
We're
also.
Just creating a list of like watchwords.
But at risk of and contributes to, that's how, oh my god, that actually makes me irritated, because studies and general academic writing is not going to use absolutes. It's not going to say this causes this directly correlates to this. They're like, it likely contributes to, because you have to use language like that in academia, because otherwise, it's very easy to tear down your findings and your results. That bugged me. That really bugged me.
Yeah.
So here are the things that Wyeth knew. We'll just run through it real fast, because you're exactly right. Like, no one's clutching their pearls, being like, can you believe this giant pharmaceutical company didn't have their patients in mind?
Acting bad. How dare you?
So they knew that the drugs lost effectiveness after 3 months. They knew that most people who took it regained the weight that they lost. They internally acknowledged that while PPH might be a health concern, they haven't researched it, and they will push back publicly against any label warnings. They will push back publicly against basically any restriction on distribution of this drug.
Whoa. So we don't know, but we're going to fight this accusation in the press.
100%. So like that written out all in one memo, right? Like it's like all in one. It's not like, oh, here's one document and then a couple years later, here's another. It's like, no, here it is. Like the vice president of this department wrote this memo, right?
It's like those summary mails you write after conference calls. You're like, hey guys, I just want to put all of the evil stuff we're doing in one place so we can refer to it later. I don't see why this would be a problem at all.
So here's one of the things that genuinely shocked me. Mm-hmm. You might be unshocked. I am super shocked by this. Part of their budget, and this is like very clear in discovery documents, is that they hired an outside PR firm to hire medical experts to write papers in praise of fen-phen and Redux and get them published in journals.
Ooh, that's rough.
Yeah. The ethics chair at the AMA, the American Medical Association, publicly freaks out and like kind of loses it on Wyeth and Interneuron. And they say, these are advertisements that are being couched as valid scientific papers, which is super dangerous.
Extremely bad, yeah.
And they're paying like $20,000 per paper, which is both more and less than I would anticipate, right? I will say a bunch of these came up in the research for this record.
Oh, yeah.
You know, when you're reading scientific research, the titles are incredibly dry. They're not making big, bold statements. They're like, this might be true under these conditions. We still need to study more in these ways. These are 2 actual titles of papers about fen-phen and Redux. One of them was called Rushing to Judgment on Fen-phen, and the other one says, the fen-phen diet drug combination is not associated with valvular heart disease.
Nice.
Which is like, again, like you and I have talked to enough researchers to know that is not researcher language. That's PR language.
It's like, you're wrong about fen-phen, basically.
Right, totally. You're wrong about our product, so buy it.
Yeah.
So all of this happens. Fen-phen and Redux are both finally pulled from the market. And from start to finish, from approval of the drug to being pulled from the market, the whole thing is about 3 years, which is so fast for these processes, right?
I mean, this is my cynical take on it, but I'm imagining that the company made more money in those 3 years than they ended up paying in like lawsuits and stuff. Do we know?
I do know. Because, and we'll like skip ahead, they essentially have to shutter their operations over this settlement. Like there is a massive class action lawsuit. Okay. So in 2000, a federal judge approves a settlement for this huge class action lawsuit. The settlement is $3.75 billion. And according to Reuters, it is the 3rd largest pharmaceutical settlement in the nation's history.
It's funny that it's not the first, because it's like pharmaceutical companies are so fucking bad. This is barely in the top 5. Great job, guys.
So ultimately, they find that 45,000 people who took fen-phen and Redux developed either primary pulmonary hypertension or heart valve damage.
Holy shit.
45,000 people end up with heart conditions as a result of this.
Yes, but
that is terrible. I'm just curious that 45,000 people, what is the percentage of that? Not that it justifies anything. I'm just curious, like, is those that develop serious complications, my guess is that that's outside the general realm of acceptability with pharmaceuticals, and that's part of the reason why this erupted so much. But I'm just curious, like, of those with like similar medications or just even general medications, those that develop severe side effects from it, and life-changing side effects, what is the percentage of the fen-phen users in comparison to like the other generalized pharmaceuticals that are on the market? What is the percentage difference of users there, of those that suffered severe side effects? It's just something that I'm curious about. I'm like, was this like really egregious, or was it just outside acceptable norms? It's just one of those things that crosses my mind.
how many people were struck by lightning?
And how many of those people are now thin and depressed?
How do those people look now, huh?
Sure. And like many people also died. These are heart conditions and brain conditions, right? Like
Yes.
You could sort of make an argument about like liver or pancreas or whatever, that these are sort of like at least manageable things. If you are messing with your heart and your brain, those are some real baseline functions, right?
Although what's also interesting about this is that, we always focus.
Yeah, I guess when you consider, percentage also comes into play, but I guess the severity of these, if they're affecting the heart and the brain, again, of medications though that have the potential to affect the heart and the brain, what is the percentage difference of users affected by those severe side effects to like general pharmaceuticals? It's just one of those things that I'm curious about. I have no idea how I would really look that up, given that fen-phen isn't on the market anymore. And from the sound of it, it was only on the market for like 3 fucking years. So it's not really, I wonder, might just do a quick lookup. Okay, so I did a quick lookup, and from the looks of it, part of the reason why fen-phen was like so bad was that the likelihood of developing valvular heart disease was, as of 1997, 27 per 113 cases, which is pretty fucking high. And I would not be surprised if that goes outside like acceptable realms. And then on top of that, for those that get PPH, the symptoms are vague enough that it's hard to connect it to PPH and then therefore to fen-phen. And so the risk of that going undiagnosed and unrecognized was very high, and that could have also been another reason why fen-phen in particularly was considered super dangerous. The rate at which people were affected, and then the difficulty in connecting the side effects to the medication itself. And recognizing like PPH, which was a common side effect, as they've said. So just wanted to put that out there. So it seems like there were unusually high rates. I don't have anything to compare to what like other medications would, but 27 out of 113 cases is, let me do some quick math. So that's about 24% of people that would experience serious side effects, and that's just with valvular heart disease. That's not including PPH. So that makes sense why this was considered an exceptionally dangerous medication. Apart from just the severity of the risks to begin with, the frequency of those severe risks or the severe adverse effects was very high.
It's on these sort of extreme side effects, harmful side effects of pharmaceutical drugs. But there's also the basic question of like, this didn't do what it said it was going to do, right? And that if people were taking it, even if they lost weight for 3 months, presumably the vast majority of them would have gained it back anyway. So like even by their own standard, I'm assuming it didn't even do what it said on the bottle.
Right. This feels like sort of the dirty little secret of the diet industry, or the thing that they're like trying to distract people from. We're all dieting all the time. We're all taking part in cleanses and detoxes and diets and weight loss efforts and whatever. And none of us are.
And that's the issue, though, is that they used the fen-phen as a miracle drug instead of a tool. And that's just putting aside, we're not even addressing the issues with fen-phen itself. But of course you're going to gain the weight back when you go off the medication if you have not done anything to adjust your eating habits. You have to adjust your eating habits. It has to be a lifestyle change. Stuff like fen-phen and other medications that are like appetite suppressants are there to make the dietary changes that you should be doing easier, because you won't get hungry as often. And as you eat less, your appetite will naturally go down as well. So it's a way to kind of kickstart that. Now, again, fen-phen was not an ideal medication for this, clearly. It had issues, but the point still stands. And the same goes with dieting, like fad diets and detox cleanses and all that shit. That is not conducive to sustained weight loss. Lifestyle changes and good habits are what lead to weight loss and keeping the weight off.
Actually losing weight in the long term, but we're still buying in, so they're still taking advantage of that.
I mean, this is like partly why we're naming this show this, is because the maintenance phase of any diet is the diet. That there's no such thing as like jump-starting your weight loss or like kick-starting a diet plan. It's like, no, the minute your habits go back to a default, your weight is going to default.
Right.
So again, if you're taking
Okay, you guys understand that then. You guys understand that it has to be a lifestyle change then, right? That you have to make consistent lifestyle changes. You can't go back to your old habits in order to maintain the weight loss. Then we're on the same page.
a pill for 3 months and then you go off the pill, there's no reason to believe that you wouldn't just rebound to your previous weight, because that's how bodies work.
Totally.
Yeah, it sucks.
This was also a major systems failure on the part of the FDA.
Dude, yes.
And then they contradict themselves because that's just how bodies work. No, that's how people that haven't committed to changing their habits work. That's how that works.
Part of this is that Wyeth didn't tell people, but again, like, shocking, a manufacturer didn't tell someone about their product not working or having harmful consequences, right?
Right.
The bigger challenge here is, like, how do 45,000 people end up with heart disease as a result of a drug that they've taken and the FDA doesn't catch it? That's more than half the population of Fargo, North Dakota, I have learned. So it highlighted some major sort of shortcomings in the ways that drug reactions were reported, that they were analyzed, that they were sort of circulated internally, right? Some of these reports came in and didn't actually make it back to the advisory committee staffing person,
Oof.
right? The person who's in charge of regulating this particular drug, right? So there's just like failure on failure on failure inside the FDA.
Right, because there's the central question is like, if their internal data was showing that people weren't, for example, keeping the weight off after they stopped using the drug, why wasn't that part of like the packet of information that they were forced to turn over to the FDA?
Right. Why did it take a class action lawsuit after all of this damage has happened to catch that this was not only possible, but in this case, likely, right?
Yeah, send us your Palpatine memos at the beginning of the process.
So again, like, Wyeth gets this huge judgment, but like the bottom line here, and this is the part that is really sort of haunting to me, the FDA is still approving diet drugs. They approved one, for the life of me, I can't remember the name. It was marketed as Ally, was the name of it.
Yeah, this came up a lot when I was doing reporting on my article. I also forget the name, but it's like, it's one of those pills that basically, it can help you lose 10% of your body weight. And again, like, once you stop taking it, you gain all the weight back. It has the same structural limitations as fen-phen, although it's probably not just like straight up crack cocaine in your system, I hope.
Right, totally. It's not going to murder you immediately.
Yes.
But it's Orlistat. That's the name of it.
Orlistat, yes.
So in 2012, the FDA approved Qsymia, which is another phentermine-based weight loss drug. So it's the same sort of amphetamine-based. Phentermine is half of fen-phen, right?
Right.
There's this ongoing string of research about whether or not fen-phen could be used in treatment of addiction, especially to alcohol and cocaine. So there have been studies in the last 10 or 20 years about could it be effective here? And actually this year in France, there is a huge trial happening about another weight loss drug called Mediator, which was pulled from the market in 2010 after causing, the numbers vary, but it's up to 2,100 deaths in France. In a real fun twist, the defendant is Servier International, which is like a big drug company based in France. They were Interneuron's partner in buying and selling Redux.
Oh.
So it's truly the same people doing it all again.
Like the literal same people.
Right.
Like, hey, Steve, I know you from the last one of these.
Today, phentermine is number 210 on the list of the most prescribed medications in the U.S.
Wait, so it's still around?
Phentermine is, which is not all of fen-phen, right? It's part of the drug cocktail.
The Holy Trinity that we were, yes.
That's right. And I did a Google search of fen-phen as part of this because I was like, I wonder what comes up. Two of the suggested search terms in Google are, is fen-phen still available, and where can I get fen-phen?
Dude, yes. I actually looked into this when I was working on my article, and I also found a lot of demand for fen-phen and places selling it or pretending to sell it. I mean, I don't know if they're just selling sawdust pills or whatever, but like you can go online and buy quote unquote fen-phen. I have no idea what you're going to get in the bottle that you get.
So there you go. I mean, like that's the whole story. It's like it got smacked down in a really public way, but it's still around.
I feel like history is always a nice corrective to this idea that it's like, we made a mistake as a society and then we learned and we never did it again. In most of these stories, you're like, oh no, we're still doing
No, I don't know who really thinks that, except, the young and naive. There's a saying called history repeats itself for a reason. People are always going to do corrupt things, and companies will find workarounds for just about anything. Like that, it does not surprise me that phentermine is still on the market, although from the sound of it, it was fen-phen, like the drug cocktail, that was the bigger issue than just phentermine itself. But I don't know enough about phentermine to say for sure. But anyway, we're gonna go. We don't have much left of this, and I don't know. And I'll share my full thoughts at the end here, but we still have about 7 minutes left, so.
Really the exact same thing.
Right.
Nothing has changed.
Right. Like many things, we get outraged about it in a cyclical way and then decide to stop paying attention or get some kind of like, satisfying climax to the story.
Right.
And so we assume that all the sort of underlying issues are solved. And in this case, they are very much not.
Does this make you think any differently about your own experience? Like, are you more mad that this was prescribed to you as a 14-year-old now than you were a couple weeks ago?
Oh, I'm more freaked out.
Yeah.
Because essentially, so like, the effects of primary pulmonary hypertension can have an onset that is long after the first time you take the drug.
Oh, shit.
In 2012, Wyeth, which is now owned by Pfizer, asked a federal judge to bar any fen-phen cases from going to trial if they had developed any symptoms more than 9 years after taking the medication.
Oh, interesting.
Right. So they're trying to get anything sort of like barred that feels too far out to them, which I can sort of understand, right? On the one hand, you can be like, listen, they took this drug. It's a really high risk.
Right.
But on the other hand, you kind of can't know.
Yeah, it would be difficult to make a strong case for that. Yeah.
It would be very difficult to prove a causal relationship in an individual.
Right.
So like, I sort of get it. And also I'm like, but listen, every single thing Wyeth has done so far has been garbage. So I'm willing to consider that this is also garbage, right?
Every decision that companies make is profit maximization. So like we should just, they're not doing this for public health. They're not doing this for fairness or accuracy or like legal purity. They're doing it to preserve their profits. And so however you feel about that morally, like that is what they are doing. And so we should always come into it with that assumption in mind.
100%. So how about you? You came into this sort of like, you're like, everybody I talked to didn't know what it was, which is mind-blowing to me.
Well, it's also because most of the people I've been asking are men. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think the gendered aspects of this are so interesting because if, the obesity epidemic is like this biological thing that is really concerning, et cetera, 300,000 deaths, then like there's no reason why women would be prescribed diet pills more than men. But the fact that this was marketed toward women implies that there's clearly like an element of like looks, like women are judged on their looks to an extent that men are not.
Right.
And so you're clearly appealing to that in your marketing while pretending that all you're appealing to is health.
Absolutely. And that's also like borne out by the data around bias facing fat people, right? That like women who are considered quote unquote overweight by even a small amount make significantly less money in the same job.
Right.
And for men, it takes getting very, very fat before that should.
I kind of wish they would cite that. Only because that's a pretty distinct claim to make, that women that are even just the tiniest bit overweight make significantly less. I would just like to know, granted, I work in a job with a union, so I've never had to worry about equal pay or that. Like, I've worked in union jobs my entire life. I'm not familiar with this. Curious what you think and what you have to say if you have at all been affected by that. But I do wish there was a citation there.
Up in their paycheck, right? And in this case, we're seeing like a conscious effort to focus on women.
Which is just like revealing of the exercise, because it's basically a pill that's going to make people look better. And you're selling it as a weight loss pill because like that's what you need to tell the FDA, like it's public health, blah, blah, blah. But what you're actually promising people is look better in this pill form.
Absolutely. And again, like this also feels to me like very clearly racialized, right? The sort of income levels that they're talking about, like the folks who are sort of primary plaintiffs in this are overwhelmingly white women. They're overwhelmingly educated white women. One of them is a PhD candidate, right? Like there's like all of these stories of like very promising young white women in the way that we like to talk about promising young white people, right? Being sort of cut down in their prime.
Right.
We're talking about a drug that causes hypertension, and we're not actually exploring the stories of Black people, of Latino people, right? Like people who are already at higher risk for hypertension and heart disease. The dangers to people of color taking this drug are different and probably much worse. Like there's not really data around that I've found at least, but it seems not great.
I mean, so much of this would come back also to like insurance status. First of all, insurance of like who's having access to doctors. But then also, I mean, what you come across in the literature over and over again is that fat people, especially fat people of color at doctors, are often sort of punished. Like, I'm not going to give you this diabetes medication. You refuse to lose weight on your own, so I'm not going to help you.
Yep.
I do wonder if there is an element of like, well,
I am very curious. Where the fuck is there a doctor that's saying, I'm not going to give you diabetes medication because you're not doing anything to lose weight? Like, genuine question, where the fuck is this? Like, I understand doctors not giving people like bariatric surgery or weight loss medications when patients won't adhere to dietary restrictions or what have you, but withholding diabetes medication from a diabetic, that's a new one for me. Opinions on that? That feels a bit extreme.
I'm not going to give you the diet pill because I'm holding you to the standard that like you should be able to do it yourself. I'm not going to give you the quote unquote easy way out. Whereas like if a wealthy white housewife comes in, it's like, oh, she's busy. She's on a bunch of charity boards. She's doing the gardening. I have to help her.
Yes, totally agreed. It feels very paternalistic to me too. It definitely feels like the medical version of like, you can have a puppy when you've proven that you can take care of it, right? Like it's just like really a gross way of dealing with like major health issues.
Yeah.
Ugh.
I just think there's this wind at the back of any weight loss drug or anything that is going to promise a easy solution to this much more complicated problem. From, the people who sit on these advisory boards to the people who work in medical journals to marketers to doctors themselves. It's like everybody just wants something quick and easy for this. And so in a million like little ways, I think people reduce their critical thinking to be like, yeah, that sounds good. Like, let's push this through a little bit faster. Let's subject it to a little bit less scrutiny. And it's like you add up all those little tiny decisions and it results in this just like greased water slide of this pill getting onto the market that like really had no place being given to large numbers of people.
Absolutely. And like the fact that there was so little testing of the drugs in combination
Yeah.
is fully bananas to me. Again, like pharmaceutical companies acting badly, the FDA not requiring more of them is very troubling.
Just the idea that like, well, driving is fine and wearing sunglasses is fine. So driving while wearing sunglasses, I don't see what the problem is, right? It's like, it's very obvious that drugs have effects in combination with each other that are not predicted by their individual effects. And like, this is not like an exotic concept to scientists, but for some reason, it seems like everybody was like, whoops, guess it's fine.
Yeah, that's right. Anyway, it's a real bummer. It's a real bummer of a story.
It's the only bummer of an episode we're going to have.
Absolutely. Everything else is sunshine and roses.
After this, it's just going to be how to get 10,000 steps and how to lose 10 pounds for your wedding.
Step 1, get engaged. Step 2, lose 10 pounds.
All right, so that's the end of that. Again, I don't have a whole lot of background with fen-phen, so I don't have a huge amount to say. But I did find their contradictory expectations and behavior, given that they are part of the fat acceptance community, and that stuff like, oh, they're blaming, correlation does not equal causation when there's a mountain of evidence to suggest that this is, while they can't prove it, it is a causation sort of thing. And then the whole propping up proof in a way that is not conducive to scientific studies, and just like general things that they were talking about that felt very much like for me, but not for thee. Again, not defending Fen, just their kind of hypocritical expectations, depending on whether it's stemming from something they agree with or not. But not a whole else lot for me to really say. I don't. After looking at some of the results of Fen, I am glad that it was taken off the market. I'm glad that it was only on the market for 3 years. And to a certain extent, I agree that there should have been more testing with it and testing of the cocktail in particular before it had been released to the general public. Uh, Again, this is not something that is unique to this particular medication, though, and I don't know. It's something that shouldn't have happened, but this is not just diet industry bullshit. This is kind of a prevalent and pervasive problem. But that's all I really have to say about that today. I have not been diving much into manhwa lately because this past week was the week before spring break, so the children were feral, and I had a hell of a time uh, helping the teachers keep everyone in line and monitoring them, and a lot of there was a fuck ton of kid drama and kids getting upset with other kids and kids doing shit that they shouldn't have because they're butthurt about something. Like it was emotions were high, fatigue was high, everyone was fucking exhausted, and then to top off, like the cherry on the top of my cake is uh family that I like but don't have anything particularly in common with other than the fact that we are family. I've been visiting in order to aid an elderly family member I've been helping take care of to move and live with someone else. And I apologize if you can hear that. My dog is upset. Everyone else in the house just left, and I'm the only one here, which means she cannot be left alone. And so we might hear some scratching as I wrap this up. And now, on top of that, the person that's coming to kind of take over her care, I don't like them, and I am suspicious of them, and they are. It's there's some concerns, not in terms of safety, but in terms of potential theft. I'm not gonna get too deep into that, but yeah. So I've been stressed, and I overspent on money, and I overate my calories by a lot for a couple of days this week. Um, but this should be over by Wednesday, probably before this is even published to YouTube. But yeah, that's my life right now. I'm tired and I'm overindulging in a lot of things. And I'm just trying to rein myself in enough that I don't completely derail myself. Um, like I kind of did. I went 800 calories over my calorie limit yesterday because it was like a release of stress. I'm between the two family visits, and I spent more money than I needed to, and I ate far more than I needed to, and it was kind of a recognition of, okay, this is how I deal with stress. I overindulge. And so I'm trying to rein it back in. If I can rein it back in after, like, I think I didn't have 2 days of eating 800 calories over. I had two days of eating significantly over my calories. Um, and I'm like, okay, today's the day I'm gonna get back into the swing of things and get back to being within my calories and exercising and that whole thing. But anyway, that's enough of my rambling for today. Thank you so much for watching. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you next time.